there can be a million ways that money just leaks out of your business. It's a death by a thousand cuts. All of a sudden someone doesn't fill up the cooler properly, and all of a sudden the person that comes in next takes them twice as long. So they have to do twice as much work. Our main job as owners is basically setting a standard and ensuring that our team upholds it in every aspect of the business.
You just don't know the numbers. You don't know your labor. You don't know your productivity measures. You don't know your target food cost. You don't know appropriate labor targets. And if you don't know them, and you don't know exactly what you're producing right now, well, here's a big surprise. You're going to continue to lose money.
Welcome back to the Restaurant Growth Accelerator Podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Scott, multi-location owner for almost 20 years, and now I help restaurant owners increase their sales, their time, and put more money in the bank. And today I've got our Special Projects Director, Nathan. And today what we're going to talk about is a pretty simple topic, but it's going to be hard to hear. Your business just isn't that good. So, Nathan, was there a realization in your journey where you realized, like, hey, I'm just not that good right now?
Oh, yeah. Which one? I mean, there's a number. That happens a lot. You feel it a lot. And, I'll say it like this. So there was a point where my group of restaurants were going to expand. Well, the mandate was we needed to expand. We need more locations. We're ready to grow. And we just weren't ready to grow. My profit wasn't great. The restaurants didn't look good. The staffing wasn't great. The training wasn't great. And I knew it. And as we started to push forward and staff our new locations, I got left behind a little bit because I could not contribute to the growth of the company because my restaurant sales were down and my people weren't great. And I wasn't ready. And I had to take a little look in the mirror at that point. I always say that you can do two things. You can look through the window and you can, blame and point your finger at somebody else and see what you think the problem is, or you can look in the mirror and look at yourself and see what you weren't doing. And I realized that my positioning of my restaurant and the performance of it were directly correlational to how I was leading and the systems that I was implementing and following up on, or rather not, I think is the point. That was probably the first biggest moment that I realized I wasn't doing what I thought I was doing.
Yeah. No, I get that. So let's dive into that a little bit, because a lot of restaurant owners today, like, the stuff that I hear most often is like, oh, Andrew, like, you don't understand, the economy is terrible, like, in my area, like, nobody wants to work in my area, and like, people just aren't spending like they used to in my area. And now let me say this, there is an element of truth to all of those things. I will say that there is an element of truth with, the economy affecting things, the prices of things going up, and the labor market shifting. You are absolutely right in the sense that is a fact to a degree as to how it's affecting you. But here's the question I typically ask. I say, okay, like, do you think there's any other restaurants in all of the entire country that are able to solve those challenges and still have, good people, or still be able to turn a profit, or have their best sales months ever? And they say, well, I guess there's probably some, right? And I say, yeah. So, at the end of the day, the real question is, what are they doing that you're not, right? Because if there is even one restaurant that can find good people, the phrase, nobody wants to work anymore, is not true, because it's not nobody. It is just that many people do not want to work anymore. And that slight change means that it is possible to actually move forward and get some results. The question is about how. And so I will take you back on a journey back to 2008. And this was when I was just newly in business, of course. Major economic meltdown with the housing crisis and everything like that. Like, it was a major recession time, and the stock market was falling and everything was happening. And guess what? I was like, man, how can any restaurant survive in this economy? Right? I remember saying that, like, how can we survive this? We can't. People are spending less, like, there's all these things that are happening. And you know what? I stood there and I complained. I talked to my family, I talked to my employees about how bad things were, but guess what? None of those words ever changed my bank account. right? And so what I had to do instead is I said, the economy sucks right now, but what can I do to then fix it? Right? I can't fix the economy, but what can I do in my business that's actually going to enable me to be better in the long run? How can I still make my business successful despite the economy being bad, despite all of these challenges that were happening, right? So like I had to look at myself in the mirror and say, okay, well, yeah, the economy sucks. I do not head the government. I cannot fix this, but what can I do that's going to make things better? And I will tell you that over the next couple years, with the stuff that I did, we nearly doubled our sales, right? Was that because of the economy? No, it's because of what I did in spite of the economy. And so most owners, here is the tough thing. Most owners will tell me, Andrew, I'm working so much. I'm working 80 hours a week. Like, how much more do you want me to work? How much more do you want me? Like, what else do you want me to do? I'm doing everything. And here is a tough fact that we all have to face as business owners. It is not the effort that we put in that matters, but rather the result of the effort that we put in. So you could work 500 hours in a day, which we all know is impossible, but you could work 500 hours in a day, but if it still doesn't move the needle, then it still wasn't enough. And that is a fact that we all have to understand and kind of look at that and say, okay, it's not about the effort I put in, because in normal jobs, right, when we're all, paid by the hour or whatever the case is, like you put in your time, you get money. In a business, no, your business gets paid off the results of what you do, right? You get paid off the value that you provide. And if that doesn't happen, then you don't get paid. And so here's where I would go a step further is you could be working a lot of hours, but my question is, are you working on the right things in your business? And are you doing it in the way that is actually going to get the result? Now, I know this is more theoretical right now as we start this out, but let's dive a little bit deeper into some things. So like, I'll give you the example. Like I talk to, people that are considering coming to work with us and stuff like that, and say, Andrew, I talked to them about their interviewing strategy and stuff like that. And they're like, oh, well, Andrew, like I already do interviews. And I'm like, yeah, but are your interviews good? Right? Like what?
I've been interviewing for 30 years. I'm really good at it. But are you?
Well, what do the results show? Because then they told me I can't keep anyone past 3 months. And, most people I talk to don't take the job. And then if they don't leave within 3 months, I fire them because they suck. I'm like, okay, so, you might have been interviewing for a very long time, but it doesn't mean you're good at it, right? The result dictates how good you are at it, right? Same thing with training. Like, oh, well, I can do it well, so therefore I'm a great trainer. Well, what dictates success in training is how many of your trainees actually get up to proficiency and how fast they get up to proficiency. So we just have to understand that it's not about the effort we put in, but rather the result of what happens. And so if you look at your restaurant finances and you're working 80 hours a week and you're still losing money, you know what? Your business just isn't that good. That's right. So it's our job to go and find out, okay, what piece of the business do I need to work on to make that better? Right?
Yeah, that's a great way that you say that. It makes me, I just want to chime in on that for a second. If we get to a point where we're seeing staff turnover, we're great interviewers. We interview great. We find great staff. Oh yeah, we're totally great at training. We're bringing these great people, but I have this turnover at the 3-month mark. Here's the reality. You can sit there and you can say nobody wants to work anymore, right? I don't know. I hear millennials and the new generation, they don't want to work. I hear that all the time when I talk to clients. But here's the thing, they're leaving for a reason. And if you resign yourself to just say, it's just everybody, it's not me, it's everybody else. Well, what are you going to do with that information? If that's what you truly believe, what do you do with that? Nothing. You're going to change, people's perception and their work ethic? No. So we have to then take a look at what is it that we're not providing? What is it that we're not doing? What is it that we're not confronting to give us the best shot to win? And that's, I don't know, there's a little bit of that kind of, I don't want to call it victim mentality, but maybe that's what it is it's not me, it's everything else.
I think it's that in part, and victim mentality is, it's a tough one to to swallow, but here's kind of how it's either a victim or a victor mentality. So here's how you can kind of tell is when a situation happens, if you say, well, this happened to me and therefore, X bad thing happened. Like, I'll just give you an example. Oh, the economy went down and therefore my business didn't make money. So now, I can't afford to feed my kids. Right. So like that is a victim mentality because outside factor then had control over you, which made you a victim. That'd be like if you're walking down the street and a car hit you. Yes, you were a victim because an outside force literally just, impacted you. And now there's repercussions of that. That is victim. Now, a victor is someone who, for example, the economy made my business suffer. And so therefore I learned how to, adjust my pricing or negotiate better with vendors, or, I found a way to upsell our existing customers more so that I made more than I would have despite what happened with the economy, right? So that's a victor mentality, which is where we say, yes, this is the thing. It absolutely is, but I still need to change so that the outcome changes. Right? Because we can easily sit there and we could sit in the corner and we could cry over spilt milk. And I had a business coach that said this to me once. You can cry over spilt milk, or you can get up off your ass and do something about it. It's pretty much the wording that he used. And of course, at the time I was like, screw you, man. But
I don't know what I'm going through.
Yeah. But the truth was he was right, because I was sitting there in my restaurant and I was just like so mad and like nothing was working, but I was working so much. I should have success. I should have all these things, but I didn't. So instead of going, okay, well, how can I get them? I was like, no, well, the system's broken and everything's broken. And like, why am I even doing this? It was a defeatist mentality. And everyone goes there from time to time. Don't get me wrong. Things are frustrating and it's stressful. That's what business is. Right? Like there will be days when things are amazing and there will be days when they are not. And it's that pain tolerance that we develop as business owners that allows us to then take that. And then despite all of that other stuff that would crush someone else, we keep moving forward and we solve those challenges. So those are the kind of things that I kind of want to talk about. So like when I'm looking at a restaurant business, and this is a great example that comes up. I asked a person on a webinar the other day. I said, okay, is everyone upselling in your business the way that they should be? And this one guy's like, yeah, everybody. And I'm like, okay, so every single person in your restaurant is upselling 100% of the time exactly the way they should. And he's like, yeah, absolutely. And I'm like, damn, like how much is your average check increase? He's like, well, it hasn't. And I'm like, okay, I think there's a problem here. And so I'm like, I asked like, okay, so how do you know that every person is upselling every single time without fail to the degree that you want them to be? He's like, oh, well, because when I'm there, I upsell the way that we should. So everyone else does that. And I'm like, So let's dive into this. So I know that you do that. How many customers, do you serve in a week, and how many of those do you personally serve? And he's like, oh, like 5% or whatever. I'm like, okay, well then how do you know that those other 95% are getting that same treatment? Like how have you verified other than a belief that you have? And he's like, well, I don't know. I'm like, okay, well that's a great place to start. And so here's what I want to point out is that in business, we often don't die from one big stab to the neck. The economy, or our restaurant burns down. It's normally not that kills most restaurants. It's death from 1,000 cuts. And so here's what I mean by that is in this situation with upselling, maybe one server is upselling 50% of the time. Maybe some are upselling 20% of the time. Maybe one's upselling 90% of the time. Right? And focusing on those types of things. But the point is, each of those servers not being at 100%, it's just those small percentage points that start to add up, right? Because all of a sudden, the person who's doing it 20% of the time, okay, maybe they're leaving $30 on the table per day. But let me dig up my calculator here, and let's just take a look. So even if it's $30 per day, times 365 is $11,000, $10,950. But basically $11,000. So there's $11,000 in revenue. Might not seem like much, but say you have 10 servers, right? And they're all at varying degrees. All of a sudden that starts to add up to, you know, 60, 70, $100,000 in a year of potentially lost revenue, right? People don't understand that. And so like another one is like when we're talking about food and labor costs, you know, all it takes, and this really hit home to one person because she was doing about 600,000 a year in revenue. And I was like, hey, Vicky, and Vicky, if you're listening to this, by the way, I haven't seen you in a while. I hope you're doing well. But 1% of your sales is $6,000, right? Because she just finished telling me like, oh yeah, like our labor cost is this, like, you know, we're like 1% over, you know, it's not a big deal. We're pretty much on point. I'm like, okay, so that's $6,000. So the question I have for you at the end of the year, if someone had the opportunity of handing you a stack of $6,000 or tossing it in the garbage, which one would you rather they do? Well, I'd rather have it in my hand. Like, okay, well, what could you do with $6,000 at the end of the year? Oh, well, that's like a whole vacation, right? Like, yeah, I could do so much with that. You know, like there's all sorts of things I could do. And so like you just started listing off all the things she could do. And so I'm like, you know, so is 1% really nothing? Or is it actually something? And that again is off a business that only does 600,000 a year. It was not a high revenue business at all. You know, we deal with businesses sometimes that, you know, have 2 or 3 million in revenue or more, just like per location. So like, you know, we deal with everybody like along that spread. But the point is, most people just think 1%, oh, it's nothing, right? But that 1%, and then another percent for your food cost, and then another couple percent on your revenue, like all of a sudden we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. Then I asked the owner, like, how much are you paying yourself and how much is your profit at the end of the year? And they're like, yeah, we lost money last year. I'm like, okay. So it's a death by 1,000 cuts. It's every little piece. So that's the kind of stuff that we need to think about. And so when you think, yeah, I've got a great business, you know, because we do all this work and I put in all this effort, like, what's the end result of that? And are you really that good? Because if you were really that good, you probably would have higher profit margins. Restaurant owners, before you open more locations, stop. I've seen way too many owners go from 1 to 2 to 3 to bankruptcy. I know because I was once there myself. The difference in owning multiple locations is how you have to change, and if you don't make the shift, it'll take years to recover. I took my 3 biggest lessons and put them in a free ebook called the Multi-Unit Playbook, so you don't have to go through the same struggles that I did. Go to the link in the description below and get your free copy today, right?
Yeah. Listen, I would say this only because you ran down the path of the, average guest check or increasing an average guest check by, whether it's $1 or $2. Realistically, if we were to say we're going to increase our average guest check, and if you don't know that metric, it's kind of as simply as, total sales divided by total guests that you've had. So I feel like I should probably say that. So, on average, increasing by $1 or $2 is as simple as selling a gravy or add bread or put cheese on that. Do you want bacon with that? It can sometimes be as simple as that, and it's different for every restaurant. But here's the thing, if you start to crunch those numbers, in the example of the client that you just said was like, oh yeah, absolutely, we upsell all the time, but it hasn't moved the needle. Well, listen, if we do upsell every single time, we have the potential to grow your sales by 10 to 20%, depending on your average guest check, right? So simply by selling gravy, just talking about gravy at every table as an example, or cheese on a burger, whatever it might be, we have the potential to almost immediately increase your sales by, let's just call it 10%. Now, are we going to do that upsell to absolutely every customer? Probably not. But some upsells are going to be $5, $6, some are going to be $1, some are going to be 75 cents. And if we could even get half of that, we're talking about probably a few weeks of dedicated training, follow-up, inspection, write some scripts, touch every single server that you have to drive those upsells, and you could be looking at 5 to 7% sales increase within a couple of weeks. And what does that mean for your business? 5 to 7%, and that's if half of the people who are Romance 2 even buy any of it. Or I say romance instead of upsell. Sorry, I kind of switched gears there. I don't love the term upsell. But
Valentine's Day has passed, Nathan.
But my point is once again, if your sales are not where they need to be, if your labor is too high, if your cost of goods are too high, if you were to honestly take that look in the mirror and ask yourself, are my servers, is my frontline staff truly inspired and empowered to make that change? and they're doing it at a high level, realizing greater tips as a result of it while sales go up. And you can't say that, 100% or even 90% or even 60% of that upsell is happening. I would tell you right now, if you're working 80 hours in the business and you can't find 3 minutes to have that conversation with your staff every day, then you are absolutely looking in the wrong place. And that's why your business just isn't that good and it's not performing at the level it needs to.
Do you want me to tell you the best part about this?
Of course I do.
So, upselling and increasing the average guest check, what's the marketing spend on that?
Oh, it's a big fat goose egg. It's nothing. Zero.
Exactly. And so a lot of people don't understand this, but when you're trying to get new customers to come in the door, they are not cheap to bring in new customers. There is ad spend associated with that. You don't magically get a whole bunch of new customers for very little cost, unless you're doing something totally exceptional and you have great word of mouth, which I hope that is true for you. But like statistically, with the amount of restaurants there is, that can't be true for everyone. So the point is, with your upselling, it just doesn't cost you anything. So where can you get a better bang for your buck? You know what I mean? Like I used to look at this as, again, my business, it was a quick serve. If we were able to double the meat on someone's sandwich, it didn't cost me, like it would cost like $2 or $3 or whatever to do double meat, so we had to pay the food cost on it, but it's not like I had to staff a whole extra person to literally put another tray of meat on the sandwich. Like didn't bother me, like that was the highest profit margin stuff we ever did, was just in the upsell of that. And so that's just a really, really easy way to look at it. So I want to address a couple other areas. So we hinted on interviewing, but the questions I have, Nathan, is around when we're doing hiring. We say, oh, I hire, and like, sure, you might be successful in getting people hired, but how long do they stay and how good are they, right? Because the barometer of success in hiring is actually, do they stay for like minimum 3 months, but we're ideally going for like 6, 12 months and beyond. Like we're looking for those longer term employees, because like, here's the way I looked at it. I would never hire someone if I didn't think they were going to last at least a year. A year to 2 years was kind of my sweet spot, because then the training cost makes sense, right? Once they work for that long, it makes sense. If I didn't think someone was like going to be able to stay for that long, like if I knew that maybe they were just applying for a summer job and they planned on returning to go to college, somewhere else, I wouldn't hire them, simply because I'm like, yeah, I'm going to invest all this time in you, and by the time you get good, you're going to leave. No, I'm not going to do that. So I would never hire people with that short time span. So really the success of your hiring and your training is like, did they last 6+ months, right? And so if you think, yeah, I do interviews, I'm good. Well, how many of your people are staying for that long? And here's the other thing too. So many people say, oh, well, Andrew, like, all these people suck. And then I go, okay, well, who hired them? Right? But if it was a manager, then they say, oh, well, my manager hired them. Okay. Well, who trained your manager how to hire? Right?
Right. That's
and right. So like you just keep on going. Eventually the buck's going to stop with you. But the point is, when it comes to hiring, is that we often think just because we're doing the act of hiring means we're good at it, and that does not mean that. We actually have to have a success metric tied to that. So how many of our employees are actually reaching the 6-month mark and beyond, right? Like, and again, when I say 6 months, that is a minimum. I'm not talking about like that's the goal. The goal for me was always 2+ years, but 6 months is like a minimum, like absolute minimum. So the questions I have around that is like, maybe your business just isn't that good at hiring, and that's okay. Maybe it's the job ad that's not bringing in the right candidates. Maybe it's the questions you're asking that's not getting to the real thing. And, maybe your reference check process isn't what it should be. And I know as I say reference checks, I feel so many of you rolling your eyes and thinking, well, why should I bother doing reference checks? I say this again, reference checks can save you 15% or more on your turnover. So it's just one of those simple things where we have to actually ask the questions, but read between the lines and look for what they're not saying, right? Because like a great reference, they're like, oh my God, this person was amazing, blah, blah, blah. And then like a not so great employee, they're like, yep, they worked here. They were good. It's very muted. So there's a difference. So you got to listen to what they're not saying by that. But yeah, in some cases, like our business just isn't that good. And we need to look at what the success metric is for that, and actually go back and figure out, okay, well, where is the issue and how can I improve it?
Yeah. And here's something I would throw out. So if it is let's say the interviewing process that is just not very good in your business, do you know what questions to ask? Do you know why you ask those questions? Are you asking those questions with intent in order to measure against, have you defined you must be this tall to ride this ride? And are you asking questions that test that belief? And if you are doing reference checks, do you know what kinds of questions to ask? And do you know how to listen to the responses to find those gaps? I would say most people I've ever talked to, and they say, oh, yeah, my hiring is great and my interviewing is great. When we really start to dig into that, and we've identified that as a problem for their business, there is no intention. It's kind of going through the motion and getting a feel. It's very gut oriented. It's very emotional. And here's the thing. Yes, there has to be that level. There has to be a component of emotion because we're people talking to people. But if you're not driving that conversation towards exploration and identifying the true nature of this candidate, then you're leaving an awful lot of opportunity on the table. And those are the situations that turn into turnover because you're not giving that person what they're here to find.
Well, and here's a way we used to do that. We used to actually, for every person that turned over, we used to have an after action that we would do. And we would sit down with the manager and the trainer. If that was a different person, we'd sit down with the person that did the interview, and we would all get together. We're like, okay, so this person left, right? And we would get feedback from that person leaving as well, if we could get some from them. And so we started looking at that. We looked at their length of employment. We went back to their interview notes. Every time we went back to the ratings, because we have to rate every candidate A, B, or C, right? And so we literally went back and we evaluated the ratings, we evaluated the notes on the questions that we asked, and we evaluated the whole thing to learn, okay, where did we go wrong here? We went through the training notes, where did we go wrong here, and what can we do differently next time to have a better outcome? That was always the question we asked after every single employee left. And I have so many owners tell me, oh, well, that person wasn't fit to be here anyway. They just couldn't handle the heat. If you can't handle the heat, get out of the kitchen. And I'm like, yeah, but you hired them. So, why'd you do that? Right. So we got to understand that there's those little things that we need to start looking at, because I identified that one of the things in my business that wasn't up to the level that was affecting everything else was the people. Because if I didn't have great people, they didn't do great things. They weren't as specific on the upselling. They weren't as specific on our food costing and our portioning and our service. So if we had better people, all of those other metrics would start to improve, which is what happened. So we started there to start trying to figure that out, right? So that's just and it might not have been one giant move at a time. Sure, we added some new interview questions and then we played that out and saw how it happened. Okay, and then we tried something different. And then we just kept improving it over time. And eventually, it's like you're in this ship that's kind of sinking, and there's 100 different holes where the water's coming in. So okay, we're going to patch this hole, we're going to patch that hole. We're just one by one, we're just patching those holes and making things better till eventually you actually have a pretty solid hull in your boat and you're not going to sink anymore. So we do that in all areas of the business, right? And so, Nathan, let's dive into a little bit around, the profitability side, because there can be a million ways that money just leaks out of your business. And, maybe when it comes to the financial side of things, maybe the business just isn't that good. So where are some of those areas that you've seen some of the biggest drop off?
Well, there's a lot. So if I were to start and make it, make sense from the conversation we're having right now, is I would start with, okay, so let's say we start to solve the hiring problem and we get better people and we have stronger base pieces. Where profit can be impacted next is if our training systems are bad. If we hire somebody, we bring them in, but we don't train them appropriately, they might be great, but are they putting 6 ounces of cheese on a pizza versus 5 ounces of cheese on a pizza? And how did we train them to do that appropriately? Are they showing up, 30 minutes late for a shift, or are they showing up 15 minutes early for a shift and signing in and impacting labor? Are they not keeping up during the rush, so the restaurant starts to get dirty and now we have to invest more labor into cleaning it? So I guess my point here is that the first place where profit starts to fall down if we're not careful is in cost of goods management and labor. So if we haven't trained people to be proficient at the level we need them to be, whether that be through their ability to handle the volume coming at them or the multiple stations they may need to work, or if it's a portioning or execution piece, portion control, that's the first place it starts to fall apart, in my opinion. But the other big piece, I mean, if there's one big chunk that I would say, profit falls apart if your business isn't that good, it's that you just don't know. You just don't know the numbers. You don't know your labor. You don't know your productivity measures. You don't know your target food cost. You don't know appropriate labor targets. And if you don't know them, and you don't know exactly what you're producing right now, well, here's a big surprise. You're going to continue to lose money, or you're going to get really lucky and maybe make a little bit of money, right? And is it better to be lucky or good? My advice is that it's better to be good. And I don't know. That's where I would kind of encapsulate that is number one, awareness of what you're producing and what your target is, whether that's, break-even analysis or specific prime cost targets and systems to hit them. But I mean, that's where I would start. Knowledge. If you don't know, we got to find out right now.
Yep. No, I love that. So there's so many ways that money can just leak out. There's so many places in your business, like just right down to even, oh my God, like your daily operations, right? So here's one that I see all the time is just that, all of a sudden someone doesn't, fill up the cooler properly. Let's say you have a beer fridge or, a pop cooler, like whatever the case might be. Like someone just doesn't fill that up all the way. And then all of a sudden the person that comes in next who has to do that duty all of a sudden has to do it, it takes them twice as long. So they have to do twice as much work because it didn't get done properly the time before that, right? They just filled up like the 2 empty slots or something like that. They filled that up, right? So they didn't do it fully. And if nobody catches it, like all of a sudden that starts to impact your labor because all of a sudden everyone's focused on the wrong things at the wrong times. It's adding stress to people. It's like all those little things start to impact your margins. You don't even think about it. And so that's where us as owners need to look at that and need to understand, okay, we need to have a standard for everything we do. And our main job as owners is basically setting a standard and ensuring that our team upholds it in every aspect of the business, right? Whereas I find so many owners, what they spend their time doing is they are the standard, but they are the only standard. And it is only when they are there that the standard is there. And if the standard falls down, they're the one that fixes it, right? And they're the only one that does that. And so no wonder their business feels like it revolves around them and it takes everything from them and is never successful because you can't be, what's the Philharmonic Orchestra? Am I saying that right? Do you know what I'm talking about? The Philharmonic Orchestra? You can't be the Philharmonic Orchestra as a one-man band. You just can't, right? Same way, you can't run a full restaurant being one person. You just can't.
Nope.
There's not enough hours in the day to be able to do that. And that's where I see so many owners lose sight of all the big things because they're so focused on just putting out fires. And what they don't ask, though, is what is the symptom of those fires? So let me give you an example of that. Let's just say in your house, all of a sudden, a little fire just started breaking out and you put that out and then boom, another one starts up and you go and put that one out. And it turns out it was actually something to do with the electrical system. The wiring was faulty in the house. That's why these fires are popping up in all different places. Now, so you should always have a proper electrician, just FYI. But point is, like, all of a sudden, all this stuff happens. We start to go into firefighter mode, like quite literally in this case, and we're trying to put out these fires in all different places. But, if we never address the root cause, all those fires would still be happening in different parts of the house. And we would still run around trying to do it. If we didn't figure out what the root cause was and realize that, hey, for some reason, every electrical socket is now, like catching on fire. I don't even know if that's necessarily possible, but you get my point. So point is that we have to address the root cause of what that is. And if we don't, then we will forever be doing that same thing. And so that's when I talk about your business isn't that good, that's what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a root to all of that, which is investigation, right? I mean, Listen, if your sales aren't where they need to be, if your costs aren't where they need to be, if your training's not where it needs to be, it's about investigation. It's about tracing it back down to the root system. What is the system? And if it's you, your business is going to remain not being that good. Just as a surprise, right? If it's always you and you're always the one toting the line and there isn't a system for people to lean into, to understand the business, to make decisions for the business based on those pieces, your business is going to remain not very good because it's just you.
And we are always the ones. Our business will grow up to the level that it either bumps up to either a skill or a belief that we do not have, right? Or we have and need to change. So for example, if you believe that a restaurant can never profit more than 10%, do you think your business is ever going to profit more than 10%? Probably not, because you're not aiming for that. You're not trying to make it happen. If you believe that no one wants to work and all employees are terrible, so you have to do much more stuff yourself, do you think that might actually become a self-fulfilling prophecy? Because you assume everyone's bad, so therefore you just hire whoever and then end up, robbing them of the ability to improve because you just do it for them anyway. So that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So our business will only grow up to that level. It's either a skill set that we lack, maybe it's hiring, maybe it's finances, maybe it's marketing, it could be any one of those things. And then it'll grow up to a belief that you have. And that's the other one. Because if you believe that your business could never be more than one location, I'm still a mom and pop shop. And so therefore, you don't want to look at, okay, how do I systemize like some of the bigger companies that actually do have this figured out? If I want to stay doing things being chaotic, if that's a belief that you have, then that's where you're going to stay. And so your business will grow up to that constraint. And it will grow no further until you figure that out. And here's the deal, is you will stay in that place until you figure that out. Your business will stay the same size with the same level of profits unless you figure out how to hire the right people or how to address some of the profit killers that are there in your business that you don't even realize are there. That's where your business will stay, and that's where you will stay. And so I think us understanding that and coming and looking in the mirror and saying, you know what, my business just isn't that good. Now what? And the now what is the question that I want everyone here to ask. So, hey, here's where we're at. No fault, no whatever. It just is what it is. This is life. We are the ones who attach meaning to things that happen. So like if it rains outside, is that good or bad? Well, it depends on if you're a farmer or whether you're planning on going to the beach. Rain is still rain. It's the meaning that we attach to it. And so what I mean by that is if your business is in the place it is right now, you're the one that attaches meaning to that. So regardless, it still is what it is. So let's just look at that fact and now say, okay, now what do we do about it? And that's where the rubber meets the road. And that's where the changes can happen. And that is where I hope that you guys take this and run from it and get a more profitable business. So guys, I hope you've enjoyed this. Nathan, it has been a pleasure as always. And for everybody out there, we'll see you on the next one. This episode is brought to you by Ownership Training, where we help restaurant owners increase their profits while spending more time with their family. And if you want to know exactly what it would take to grow your profit margin to 15% and beyond while spending more time with your family, my team has a few spots open this week for a free 15-minute restaurant assessment call. Just click the book a call link in the description and we'll show you the exact frameworks we're using to help our clients do this in as little as 6 to 8 weeks. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.